thing on? What's good, my people? What's good?
Stay so fresh, so clean, think they like me. I wear more Supreme than a hype bitch. Only blue, no green, don't excite me. I can make a hole out your wife. Jeremy's got up on my...
So I'm not really too tapped into the whole copyright on YouTube. That's what happens when you have a massive water bottle beside you. Okay. So yeah, as I was saying, I don't really know too much about the copyright on YouTube, so hopefully I don't get destroyed with this video. Shit. So what do I have? This is the pre-workout ritual. First of all, how are we doing? I'm pretty sure it's Friday today, I believe. So I have 2 scoops of my boy TNF's pre-workout, Optimal 2.0. It's extremely good. Obviously it has no pump ingredients. It's mainly like an energy and focus based pre-workout, which I don't mind. My favorite pre-workout by EKKOVISION is Dethroner 2.0 or 5.0 or whatever it's called. It is absolute gas. It tastes great. Personally, me and Dro, shout out Dro, always talk about this, but you're not drinking pre-workout for the taste. Obviously, it's a nice plus to have a pre-workout that tastes good, but you're taking it because of the effects, right? So anyway, Dethroner, in my opinion, is the best pre-workout on the market. I was saying this even before working with EKKOVISION. EKKOVISION is just, it's such a good company. I'm telling you, tap into the EKKOVISION pill. My favorite products by them, I love how this is already turning into an ad and it's been like 2 minutes. But my favorite products from EKKOVISION is, first and foremost, we got Dethroner, because the pre-workout is just, it's literally insane. I've been training for 11 years. I know you guys are probably sick of me saying that, but I've tried everything, and there is no pre-workout that is as stacked as Dethroner. And then another product I really like by them is their EKKOLITE. It tastes literally fantastic, and it probably is the most stacked electrolyte drink on the market. Oh shit. So you guys gotta tap in. My favorite flavors being blackberry lemonade, which is absolute peak. And I also tried grape. Grape was really good. But yeah, blackberry lemonade, it's undefeated in all honesty. So we are headed to the gym currently. I think this is video number 4, I believe. So hopefully my phone doesn't overheat and we can post it, but we got another full body session. I am on day 4 or day 5 of the mini cut diet, whatever. I'm gonna try to drop like 7 to 9 pounds, give or take. We'll see how I feel, we'll see how training goes. I wanna get the leanest I've ever been. Obviously not like show ready lean, but you know, I wanna be in shooting distance, because I can. And then yeah, and I'm excited to reintroduce some food, get back to maintenance, bring in some lifts that I've wanted to bring in for a long time, being these 4 lifts. I want to bring in a JM press, specifically reverse banded on the Smith machine, to replace my overhead extension. I just want to, as well as a pendulum squat. No, I don't believe that you need to squat in order to maximize quad development. The quads are the only muscles that extend the knee. You guys have probably heard this argument 1,000 times, but it's hard to make an argument that makes physiological sense for needing a squat pattern without just grasping at outcome studies, because the mechanisms don't necessarily make sense, because like I said, the quads are going to be the only muscles that extend the knee. So what are you doing in a squat pattern? Well, you're just including some hip extensors, you're including the adductor magnus, the glutes, the soleus. So how is that going to bring more quad development when you're including all these other muscles? Because we know that the central motor command, that electrical signal that's sent from your brain to your muscles, is going to have to be shared amongst more muscles to complete that task. So then there's going to be less activation left over for your quads, and your quads are a massive muscle. They have what is known as a voluntary activation deficit. It can be shown up to 15 to 20% in beginner trainees. Obviously we can close that gap, but anyway. So today's video was going to be about how do we build muscle, right? Now that's a broad topic, but I'm going to try to take a stab at this. Now, you go to the gym, right? Well, first let's talk about what is mechanical tension. Okay, I might not get through all of this because this is a long topic, but what is mechanical tension? We often hear that mechanical tension this, mechanical tension that. Mechanical tension is likely, right? It's not guaranteed, but it's likely that it is the sole driver for muscle hypertrophy. And when we think of mechanical tension is happening at all points in the day. Whenever you move, there's mechanical tension. Mechanical tension is caused by cross-bridge cycling, which is happening within the sarcomere, which is the contractile unit of muscle, right? And within the sarcomere, we have these two contractile proteins being actin and myosin, and they form cross bridges, and that is essentially what causes contractions, right? What causes movement, me moving my arm, me talking, etc. Now, if mechanical tension is always present, does that mean that you're always growing? And then this is where you have to take into consideration recruitment, because it's a two-part story. You can't just have mechanical tension without recruitment, because hypertrophy is what is known as muscle fiber specific, and because it is muscle fiber specific, hold up. We got a big truck. So because hypertrophy is muscle fiber specific, a muscle fiber must be active in order for it to experience this tension. And how do we dictate activation? Well, this is based on Henneman's size principle. Henneman's size principle essentially tells us that muscle fibers are going to be, motor units, which is essentially a motor neuron and all of the muscle fibers that it innervates, is essentially going to be turned on once its threshold is reached. And this threshold is going to be dependent on the size of the signal, and the size of the signal is going to be dependent on the effort. So all that fancy terminology just means that the greater the effort, the higher degrees of motor recruitment, the further up that we climb the ladder of the motor unit pool, and the further that we go up, we're going to be activating our larger fibers. And these larger fibers, it goes from type 1 fibers, which are going to be more oxidative, they're smaller, they're involved in everyday tasks like walking, talking, etc. And then we move up the ladder, we go to type 2A and then type 2X, which are going to be our largest muscle fibers that have the greatest growth potential, and they're extremely glycolytic, so they don't last long, and they're involved in explosive tasks. Okay, so that is motor unit recruitment in a nutshell. That is Henneman's size principle. Now we'll go back to mechanical tension. So there is multiple forms of mechanical tension. We're going to have active mechanical tension and passive mechanical tension, okay? Now, active mechanical tension is unique to the concentric phase of a movement. So the concentric phase of a movement is something like curling a dumbbell, so lifting up. Now, active mechanical tension is going to be known as the primary driver of myofibrillar addition. And this is essentially going to be where you're going to have majority of your gains come from, because there isn't necessarily a functional limit on how many sarcomeres you can add in parallel. Okay, so myofibrillar addition, adding sarcomeres in parallel, sarcomerogenesis, adding sarcomeres in a series. So during the contraction of a lift, the concentric contraction, we're going to have solely active mechanical tension. Okay, this increases a muscle fiber's cross-sectional area and its ability to produce force. Now, on the other hand, during an eccentric contraction, so the lowering phase of a movement, we are going to have passive mechanical tension. Okay, passive mechanical tension is unique to the eccentric contraction, and passive mechanical tension is going to be the primary driver of sarcomerogenesis. This is essentially a fancy word of saying stretch-mediated hypertrophy, or adding sarcomeres in a series. And this is going to lead to greater contraction velocities and ranges of motion. Now, the issue with sarcomerogenesis, or stretch-mediated hypertrophy, or what happens in the deep stretch, is that there is a functional limit. This has been studied for decades. Sarcomerogenesis. Muscle fibers can only get so long, and muscles can only experience sarcomerogenesis if they're able to generate enough passive tension in order for this adaptation to occur. And for these muscles to experience this sarcomerogenesis, their sarcomere, right, the contractile unit of muscle, their sarcomere operating length must reach the descending limb in order for it to generate enough passive tension. So sarcomerogenesis, functional limit, its limit is usually reached within 3 to 6 months of regular strength training, unless you are purposely taking those muscles to a length that you've never taken them to before. So with flexibility, stretching, etc. But take like the hamstrings, for example. The hamstrings benefit from stretch-mediated hypertrophy. Sarcomerogenesis can happen in the hamstrings. But take like a seated leg curl, you have a fixed path. You can only stretch so far, and then after that point, you are not getting any more of those adaptations because you literally are bottoming out the machine. So if you wanted to further those adaptations, you would have to do like a pike stretch or like a pancake stretch, and then even then, you would eventually reach that functional limit. So majority of your gains are going to come from the concentric contraction. This is also why people say that the eccentric doesn't cause muscle growth. Well, that's not true. It does cause muscle growth, but it's going to cause muscle growth in fibers that are lower down on the motor unit pool. And as if you guys remember from the earlier portion of this kind of yap, these fibers are maxed out, right? Because based on Henneman size principle, if effort is lower, specifically 50% of what it would be on a concentric contraction, then the only fibers that are going to be active during that eccentric contraction are going to be the ones that are in the bottom 50% of the motor unit pool, which again are going to be maxed out, specifically in non-beginner trainees. So why is it going to be maxed out? So the reason for this is because during the eccentric contraction, we have both active mechanical tension and passive mechanical tension, and this is unique to the eccentric phase. During the concentric phase, we just have active mechanical tension, so effort remains high, but during the eccentric contraction, we actually have twice as much force per muscle fiber. Because we have twice as much force, the effort is going to be significantly less, and it's speculated that it's going to be around 50 to 60% less, which means that, again, remember, a fiber must be active in order for it to experience this tension. If effort is 50 to 60% less because it's considered easier because there's twice as much fiber twice as much muscle force per fiber, that means that we're only going to be recruiting fibers in the bottom 50% of the motor unit pool, and these fibers are going to be maxed out in non-beginner trainees. So that is the stretch. That is what happens in the deep stretch. That is mechanical tension 101. I think I briefly touched on motor unit recruitment. Remember, a motor unit is essentially a motor neuron and all of the muscle fibers that it innervates. I will touch on how contractions happen, action potential, central motor command, all this good stuff in probably the next video. This has already been like 14 minutes, probably my longest yap. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully you guys followed along. If you guys have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I'm gonna start downing my pre. Remember, use code FBEOD at EKKOVISION, GYMPIN, GYMOPTIMIZER. Let's get it. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you guys tonight. I stream every night at 10 p.m., 10 p.m. PST on TikTok. So yeah, have a great day.